welcome everybody. This is possibly the last spring budget seminar that we'll be able to have together. What shock horror, possibly, because I have a sneaking suspicion that, politicians being politicians, they'll change their mind, and somebody in a couple of years' time will think, actually, it used to be all right having a March budget, didn't it? We sort of had it like that for about 200 years. Well, let's go back to that. But we will see anyway. So apparently the last spring budget. Some gentlemen of a certain age are going to be disappointed because the blurb that we sent out said that it was going to be me, Leila and Alex. And Leila is in Portugal, so it's just me and Alex. So I'm sorry that the glamour element has been removed from the presentation. But for the ladies, we have Alex. Alex might not be known to all of you. I mean, most of you know who I am because I've been around for donkey's years, but Alex is one of our bright, new, young tax partners. So it's a double act, me and Alex today. Now, you will all be thinking, what the hell's he going to talk about? Because we heard the load of drivel yesterday, and we think in 5 minutes it'll all be over. And you sort of could be right, I suppose, but some of you who know the form will realise that we can drag it out to an hour and an hour and a quarter, come hell or high water. So don't think you're going to be let off that easily. My overarching impression of the speech yesterday was that Chancellors of the Exchequer would do well to act accordingly and not think they're comedians. I found it slightly embarrassing, a little bit distasteful. I mean, not that you could see me because I was at the other end of the screen, so it doesn't matter. But some of his jokes were a bit lame, and the smug look on his face as he was delivering them was a little bit nauseating. But anyway, that's up to him. He was, of course, able to talk longingly and lovingly about the greater than expected growth and the higher than expected employment, and by conversely the lower than expected unemployment rates, which of course is a very, very good thing. But the more he went into the statistics, you could not help thinking, seeing, hearing that the Office of Budget Responsibility, who are responsible for producing the statistics, do think that it could be all a bit temporary. And whilst we have this higher than expected 2% growth for this year, and we have lower than expected borrowing for this year, it doesn't really look like it's going to continue in that vein. And I'm a pessimist by nature. That's what I do for a living, be pessimistic. I get paid quite well for it. It's a great job if you can get it. But I do sense that it's not quite as rosy as he made out. Other than that, what did he talk about? Well, he spoke about very little indeed. There were all sorts of predictions beforehand. And I love predictions. I really, really love predictions. I stand on my hind legs all the time and I make brilliant predictions. I predicted before June 2016 that don't worry everybody, there's no way we'll Brexit, it'll all be all right, and I woke up on the Friday thinking, oh dear, that didn't go quite well. I then told everybody who had listened, oh, don't worry, Trump will never get in, nobody will vote for him, it's impossible, and of course that went out the window. Since when I've been telling everybody who listened that they need to do something vis-a-vis pensions. I've been banging on about pensions, and people will attest to this because some of you will have heard me saying, for God's sake, do something, get money into your pension scheme. They are going to change it. It's all going to be turned on its head. Higher rate tax relief will be abolished. We will go to some kind of ISA-based system, so fill your boots while you can. And the more I say it, the less happens. There were a little bit of change on the pension front, which we'll sort of touch on, but broadly speaking, not much of that at all. So what did we get? We got a couple of tax rises, which have been much talked about in the press and on the radio and everything this morning. You'll have heard all about that, so we'll touch on that. We got some spending commitments of a fairly modest amount on various things, like education, social care, the NHS, infrastructure, and some of the numbers were gobsmacking in in their tininess. There were such small numbers. The one that stuck out for me was the 23 million, bearing in mind that the government spends sort of the thick end of 800 billion a year. 23 million is a bit like a rounding error. I mean, it's just like nothing. But 23 million is apparently what we need to spend in the Midlands on improving the road network. And I thought, have I heard that right? 23 million on the road network in the Midlands? I went to Birmingham University, for Christ's sake. I sort of know a bit about the road network in the Midlands. Why didn't he ask me? Why didn't he ask me about the A14 going to Rugby via Kettering, for Christ's sake? Why didn't he ask me about the M6 and the M5? 23 million is going to go nowhere. I mean, what is it about? I just don't get it. So what Jacob Rees-Mogg, in a different context, described as pretty thin gruel, in my view. I mean, this was pretty thin gruel. Now, having said that, there were two elephants in the room, not just one elephant, not just Jumbo. We had Jumbo and Dumbo in the room, because what was not spoken about, of course, was Brexit. Not allowed to talk about that. Nor were we apparently allowed to talk about the fact that the exchange rate has collapsed, which is causing all sorts of difficulty for certain businesses which import, and is fueling inflation, and we see inflation starting to take off. So these things, not allowed to talk about, and they weren't spoken about, but that backdrop is clearly the most crucial thing hanging over the British economy. How costly will Brexit be, if at all? If you believe the pro-Brexiteers, it'll be all fabulous. We'll soon be in the sunlit uplands of glorious pasture land. It'll be brilliant. Other people are more pessimistic. I don't know. I don't care, really. Inflation, though, I do care about. Inflation clearly is a bad thing for any economy. So that's what we've got coming. Now, so having said all that, better get onto the real stuff. So here we go. If I press a magic button, we'll get somewhere. So some headlines. Now, some of it is all known about, isn't it? The corporation tax headline, we've been talking about this since, the old king was on the throne almost. So the rate is going to go down to 19% with effect from the 1st of April. That's a good thing. Yeah, of course it's a good thing. The rate is going to go down to 17% with effect from the 1st of April 2020. That is a good thing. When we get there, that'll be a great thing. I love it. I love falling corporation tax rates. What we didn't hear yesterday, which is what had been muttered, rumoured by the Brexiteers, is whether the corporation tax rate would be cut even further. 15% was mooted at some point, not officially, of course, but I sort of say watch this space, because if the Brexit negotiations don't go, quite as smoothly as people want, one of the things that we are told will happen is that we will savagely reduce taxes in the UK to attract inward investment. So watch this space. Reducing the rate of corporation tax does also have a knock-on effect on other things. Well, one other thing, it's the rate of tax on a dividend. It doesn't affect the rate of tax on a dividend, but it affects the overall rate of tax if you take funds out of a company by way of dividend. Because if you do that, there's sort of two taxes, corporation tax and the dividend tax. And if the corporation tax goes down, guess what? It goes down. Alex, I think, is going to talk a bit about that sort of thing, so I'm not going to trample all over his presentation. What else did we hear? Well, we got modest increases to personal allowances and a modest increase to the basic rate band. I'm not going to tell you what they are because they're all in your pack. So if you want to know all the rates, everything, they're in the pack. But 2 points. Point number one is if you have income of more than £100,000, you don't get the personal allowance. And that £100,000 ceiling has been fixed where it is now for the last 4 years. So as soon as when that rule was introduced, that was the limit and it's not moving. And when the Chancellor talks about fairness in the tax system, I say to the Chancellor, is it fair, A, that I don't get a personal allowance, and B, that you don't even index the threshold at which I might be able to get a personal allowance? No, it's not. That is not fair. What is Also interesting is that for the first time ever, we have a slight divergence of tax rates within the UK, in that in Scotland, they are not going to pass on the increase in the basic rate tax, higher rate tax threshold. So whilst in the UK, not Scotland, i.e. in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, that will be at £45,000. For Scotland, it will stay at £43,000. Now, next point, the big point, self-employed NICs. Now, again, Alex is going to do some detail about this, and it's going to be mind-boggling, the detail that he goes into, showing you how 1% of a relatively small number is a sort of relatively small number. But I mean, we're accountants, for Christ's sake. It's going to be riveting. Mark my words, it'll be great. What fascinated me was two things. Thing number one, everybody was talking about it as a tax increase, which it is. I thought, this is refreshing. They are finally talking about national insurance contributions as a tax, because it is a tax. It is a tax. It is a tax. This tax in particular is absolutely a tax. This thing called Class 4 national insurance contributions is absolutely a tax. Because, and I'm probably one of the few people in the room old enough to remember this, but when was it introduced? It was introduced in 1975. And why was it introduced? It was introduced in 1975 simply to get more national insurance out of people who the government at the time thought weren't paying enough for no great reason. It specifically bought no benefits. If you paid Class 2 national insurance, which was the self-employed stamp, they used to call it in the good old days, you used to get a card, and it had 52 little hole, sort of not holes, but markings, where you could stick stamps, and you could go to the post office and buy stamps, and you would put them on your card, and that's how you paid your national insurance contributions. Brilliant system. I don't know why we don't go back to it. Superb. But they introduced Class 4 as a way of just wringing more money out of people, but with no entitlement to benefits at all. It bought nothing. Your Class 2 bought you the basic pension and nothing else. Your Class 4 bought you nothing at all, whereas Class 1 gets you all sorts of things. Yes, it gets you a pension. In those days, it then got you the SERPs, the State Earnings Related Pension, an enhanced pension. It got you unemployment benefit. It got you all these sort of things, which Class 2 didn't get. So there are, the two massive points. If it's a tax, and it is a tax, if you want to be radical about it, why wouldn't you just abolish national insurance contributions and just say, actually, it's a tax? So we are going to have absolute taxes. We are going to make the basic rate of income tax, instead of it being 20%, we're going to make it 32%, because that is 20 plus 12, and we think 12 is the right rate of national insurance contributions, so we'll make it 32%. And if you're an employer, we will have something we'll call the jobs tax, because that's what politicians call it when the other side are introducing it. The pejorative expression for employers' national insurance is the jobs tax. So we'll call it a jobs tax, and that'll be at 13.8%, and that's it, and have done with it. And then we will decide what benefits you get, just depending on who you are, and pay for it out of the pot, because that's all that's happening at the moment. But instead, they pretend in some way that national insurance is slightly different and it's buying things. Class 4 isn't buying anything. They've never bought anything. It's not buying anything now, and it will never buy anything in the future. It is just a tax.